Right, now, here we go. Welcome everyone to today. We were just chatting amongst ourselves if you've just joined us. Welcome to another one of my Meet the Candidate events. Now, it's a marvellous sunny day today, so if you have managed to listen in live, I'm really very grateful. Now, this time it's a candidate meeting the local councillors, which of course is a truly vital role and the front-facing link to the communities right across Falkirk East. I should point out, though, that we're missing one councillor, Anne Ritchie of Bowness and Blackness, who's been having some health issues and unfortunately can't join us today. However, we do have Councillor Laura Murtagh representing Carse, Kinnaird and Tryst. Hello, Laura, how you doing?
I'm good. Hi, Michelle.
We've also got Councillor Gordon Hughes, who represents Upper Braes. Hi, Gordon.
Hi, everyone.
We've also got Councillor Adanna McCue, who represents the Lower Braes.
Hi, Michelle. Hi.
And finally, but last but no means least, Councillor David Balfour, who represents Grangemouth. How are you doing, David?
I'm doing great.
Good,
good. To see everybody.
Right. Okay. Sorry?
Good to see everybody there.
I know. It's going to be good to catch up. Now, I suppose the first thing, given that you're all councillors in Falkirk East, what I wanted to do was explore a wee bit about your kind of location, some of the challenges and the opportunities that you have in your area. So I suppose then in order, Laura, starting with yourself then first, I mentioned Carse, Kinnaird and Tryst. For people who are not from our neck of the woods, where is that? And what are some of the challenges and opportunities of your area?
Thanks, Michelle. And I think a bit like you've picked up with the name Falkirk East, not really being very descriptive of the area in which it represents. Carse, Kinnaird and Tryst is a wee bit like that, because obviously we have the Carse land behind me. You can see the Oakle Hills, and below that we've got basically the river and the Carse land. So everywhere from South Alloa and a whole collection of villages that go along the Carse up to Skin Flats before we get to David Balfour's neck of the woods in Grangemouth, and right up through Carron Shore, Stennismuir and Kinnaird. And of course, although absolutely, as you say, I'm a Falkirk East councillor, I'm also a Falkirk West councillor, and we straddle the two. So you'll be working very much as a team, hopefully, when you're elected with Michael Matheson, MSP, in the same way that the other Carse, Kinnaird and Tryst councillor who's missing from this, councillor Gary Bowes, we're very much a team and absolutely work together over one. I think we're the biggest, if not the biggest, second biggest in terms of population geographical ward in Falkirk. So it's a huge area to cover with loads of different challenges that we've got.
Yeah, so I'm interested then. We'll come back to you in some of the challenges, but I think this is useful to hear exactly what specific locations everyone kind of covers then. So Gordon, I think you were next up, and you've got Upper Braes. I mean, I guess most people, and we'll pick this up with Adanna as well, wouldn't be clear about the differential between Upper Braes and Lower Braes. So it would help if you could kind of explain that to our listeners.
Yes, no problem. Upper Braes is what I would describe as the largest geographical area in the whole of Falkirk Council area. It's basically a mixture of what I would call suburban on the one hand and rural communities on the other, with at least 14 villages and settlements across the area. Now, Upper Braes covers everything from Whitecross on the one side to Slamanan and Limerick on the other. And we've also got Brightons, Maddiston, California, Avonbridge, Shield Hill, to name but a few. So it is a diverse community. So I always think sometimes that it's small communities in the one hand and a large area called Maddiston, which has many houses, massive development on the other hand. And in some respects, it takes a bit of time to get to be known in each of those communities, because you can't just be a representative, a councillor, without knowing your communities. You've got to get to meet people. And I like to think that if I went into Whitecross or Avonbridge or Slamanan, that people would immediately recognise me, because it's about building. You've got to build relationships, and you've got to know what people have got to, what they're thinking, and how you can respond to the issues that they raise.
Yeah, I mean, I bet there's no doubt that absolutely everybody knows you, Gordon. You have the benefit of a long hinterland as well. And
well, I'll give you a laugh. Or when I first started as a councillor, I went up to Slamanan, and I started just wandering around chatting to people. By the time I got to the top, to Balquist Crescent, one lady came out and said, "Oh, it's all right." She said, "I knew you were in the village because I had the phone call to tell me that you'd arrived and you were working your way through." I should also say that I have, many years ago, my family actually lived in Slamanan. My my dad, and his brothers and sisters. Originally, the family were brought up in Limerick.
Yeah.
And then moved just after the war, and I'm talking about the Second World War, down to Slamanan and lived in Culloch Road.
Right.
So I have connections with both Limerick and Slamanan from that point of view.
Oh, you certainly do. And then moving on then, Adanna, so you're Lower Braes, obviously. Tell us a bit about Lower Braes, where that fits in the kind of the constituency.
Yep. Lower Braes, a bit like Gordon, it's quite diverse. We have some areas, you know, that are rural, and other areas that are highly populated. I think a lot of the house building over the years has concentrated in the Upper Braes, as well as Laura's ward. My ward covers Lauriston, where I live, Homint, a slither of Brightons that Gordon remembers me about anytime someone with an address that sits in my part of the ward has an inquiry. I have also Westquarter, Reading and Reading Muirhead. You'll know there's been a lot of house building in that area. So the diversity has and the geographics have changed quite a bit in our area.
Yeah. And then last but by no means least, David, yourself, Grangemouth. Is it just Grangemouth, or have you got other bits as well?
Well, the first time I was elected, we used to have skin flats as well, but that's now been moved. So it's just Grangemouth now, which is it's a reasonably big area. We're quite concentrated here, the industrial heartland, if you like. But we also need to remember that there's people here as well. It's not just industry. So we're basically a town with industry rather than an industrial town. So yeah, it's quite a diverse population here as well. We've got a lot of good points in Grangemouth. There's a few bad points here and there that we're working on. There's fantastic, I'm sure it's the same everywhere else, but there's absolutely fantastic community spirit in Grangemouth. I've seen that over the last number of years. It's absolutely fantastic. There's a lot of good groups have started up, working in the parks, cleaning up the town, making flower bikes and things like that. It's a fantastic town, and we just need to keep working at it and make it even better.
Yeah, and I think we're going to move on and chat about that, because I'm quite interested in the differences, but also the similarities of all the different areas. And of course, all of you, I know, will point out that at the heart of wherever you represent is the community. It's always about the community. So Laura, I know you didn't get much chance to kind of chat about your area, some of the challenges, because as you noted, it's a very diverse area. But it'd be useful to kind of start with you and understand some of the challenges that you're dealing with routinely, and some of the opportunities and the things you see that you think you've managed to make better and you've contributed. That'd be useful to understand of that wide area you described.
Sure. I mean, as was the case, as Gordon was saying, having this balance between villages and villages that are very, very strong with their own community as well, and it's very small communities and identity, and then as well that the wider you know, kind of more modern identity. There's people can have many layers overlapping. For example, the kind of Larbert catchment area means that we join in with, you know, a bit of Ward 5 as well. So we're very much part of a kind of a wider catchment. And I think where you've got some very, very affluent areas, if you've got a cool $500,000 and you want to buy a house up the hill, then by all means, but equally they will look on some of their communities, likes of Letham, that are quite similar to some of the challenges in the Upper Braes, where you have challenges with housing and with the electric wet heating and with, you know, fuel poverty, and also, you know, we've tried very hard to, you know, they're isolated by the fact that they're in villages, and that, you know, there is poverty within certain areas, so transport becomes an issue, and integrating people within communities into where they can get to facilities. So you know, that there's those issues. There's also environmental issues. I mean, flooding is a huge issue here. We're on the Carse land. In many ways, some parts of where we live are the people are the interlopers, as it were. You know, we've built on reclaimed land. If you've been out to Skinflats on the way earlier this week, and obviously I sit on reclaimed land myself at Airth, and you know, some of those things are common with Upper Braes and Up the Braes. They have issues with flooding, although they're of a different kind of character. But so things that we've done across the board to deal with that. I mean, I've worked very, very hard on flooding issues, and you know that it can be small victories that you might think are small. Like we've got a kind of footbridge in at Letham so that the kids can walk over to get to school, so they don't have to walk through the flood water. But that's part of a much longer term project with Scottish Water and the Falkirk Council to solve the problems at that culvert. Equally, one of the most important things that we've done, particularly over the COVID period, is really take on community empowerment, as David was saying, really accelerate the ability of our communities to lead and to input to us on what they need and how they want to engage. And so I'm a trustee of a kind of newly launched charity up at Stennismuir Football Club, and we are kind of engaging with the Community Planning Partnership to take things forward, but also some of the work that myself and as I mentioned, my councillor ward partner Gary Bouse with the community projects we've been able to help with, whether it's litter picking adventures getting up and running, whether it's the food pantries getting up and running, community gardens, partnerships with a high school, and various local groups and charities to bring them on board. You know, these are crucial things, and it's, you know, we work with our other ward colleagues as well, and work with council policy, but we also, and we'll be all knocking on your door, you know, need to work in partnership with the parliamentarians, because some of these issues we can't solve, and we need assistance with that too.
And I think we'll move on to that, because I'm interested in pulling these kind of golden threads together. And so Gordon, then, I mean, I think what Laura was touching on is about community resilience, if you like, how you build resilience across all these strands. What's your thoughts about how you've tried to develop resilience in your communities? You have also outlined all these individual different identities, which I think Adanna touched on as well. Gordon, I think your classic phrase, you're still on mute. Gordon, you're still on mute. Right, well, what we're going to do is we'll let Gordon unmute himself and come over to yourself, Adanna. I mean, I know that you have some of the issues that Laura's highlighted, you also experience the areas you represent. Is that true to say?
Yeah, but first off, I want to say my ward is absolutely gorgeous. We have the West Quarter Glen, and the history in the ward is absolutely fantastic. You know, I believe on years gone by, there was swords found in the glen, right back to the Jacobites and the Battle of Falkirk. So we're rich, our whole area is rich in history and in beauty. But
I would agree with that. Quite startlingly so. And as you know, I've been out visiting everywhere, and that hill, the walk up the hill to the monument at the top of Wallacestown, that would, so nice. Yeah, that absolutely. Yeah. That was me and my dog when we got to the top, but it was worth it for the views. I mean, I think that's one of the most spectacular views I've ever seen. Absolutely amazing.
You can see right across to Wallace's Monument
Yeah.
over in Bridge Allen and Stirling. It's a fantastic viewpoint.
Amazing.
But just what you're saying there about resilience, and obviously over the years with the history of our area and very mining villages, there's been quite a dramatic change over the years, and obviously these changes also affect our nature, you know, and the situation we're in now with the climate. And Laura was speaking there about floods, and yeah, we have experienced floods in my ward as well, because, you know, as we build houses and we take away the natural drainage, you know, there will be the need to put other things in place. And there's Grangemouth at the bottom of the hill, who's going to gather all the water, and they're going to have this amazing flood resistance programme put in place. But, you know, myself and Laura, we have been discussing and how we protect our own wards before the water does hit Grangemouth, because obviously the water is going to come from somewhere, and that's where my ward has been quite affected, and that is one of the issues within my ward at the moment. Some of the infrastructure that's been put in place over the years now needs to be upgraded. Yeah, so that is definitely one of the issues, certainly in the West Quarter area, and that gorgeous waterfall that looks magnificent also comes with fear.
Yeah, and I mean, this is something that affects yourself as well. I'll come back to you, Gordon, now that you're unmuted and asked you a question. You probably started to answer it, but the issue of flooding, of course, you know, there was the floods in Slamanan that just last year, this sort of third quarter last year. So this is an issue that's affected your areas as well, isn't it?
Yes. The situation, for example, like Slamanan, you will get a rise in water levels, and it just touches underneath the Cameron Bridge, just to show the extent of the flooding. Also, in terms of flooding, we've also had after torrential rain in Maddiston, what you have is that the water comes up the drainage in terms of the road system, and so does sewage as well. And also we have also the Craigieburn actually overflows and flows down Vella Road in Maddiston, and also we have had the Manuel Burn overflow its banks and has basically flooded some houses in Park Hall. Over and above that, and which I always think it's to do with infrastructure as well, is that we have a single combined pipe of water and sewage which runs from Limerick, Slamanan, Avonbridge into Maddiston and down to Polmont. I would love to spend millions upon millions of pounds trying to get the drainage improved, but I also think that part of the problem is obviously it's linked to climate change as well. Yeah. And that's a big issue for the future. Also within Upper Braes, we've had issues of fuel poverty, which was to do with the thermoflow heating that was put in about 9-10 years ago into houses in Whitecross, Slamanan, Avonbridge and California. Unfortunately, what has happened is that over the years, I should say to you that these heating systems in terms of the houses were at that time the most efficient, and they were cheap in that respect, but they were off peak. And unfortunately, over the years, when Ofcom or Ofgem set the actual, shall we say, tariffs, they put in a standard tariff for, you know, or a tariff for standard electricity, of which you couldn't increase above a certain amount. However, with off-peak, there was no cap put on off-peak. And over the years, the off-peak prices kept going up. So it's now minuscule, the price between off-peak and the standard electricity charge. So in that sense, that was part of the reason and part of the core problem of fuel poverty. And so the council's response has, and there's at least 700 houses in the Upper Braes area, and that's about 32%, what is it in terms of, that's the 32% of council housing. The council is going to spend at least £5.5 million in putting in gas into houses. Obviously, that has to be finalised with the Scottish Gas Network, and hopefully at the end of this month we will have a report back to see how things will progress, and if they're willing to move this forward. Also, there are some villages, there are some areas that we recognise may not get gas. For example, the likes of Stanburn, which up to now, all the properties that have gas, it's liquid petroleum gas. It's the tanks outside. So at the moment, the council are trying a pilot project in one of the houses in Stanburn, and they've got solar panels. They're looking at air source and ground source as a way forward as well, because obviously we have to look at different technologies in terms of fuel, to tackle fuel poverty, and at the same time introduce new ways of heating houses.
Yeah, and actually, probably inadvertently, all the work that you're having to do, and I know fuel poverty doesn't just apply in your areas, but I suppose the point to me, I'm quite interested in the root cause of issues. And to me, people should understand that the root cause of some of these issues are because energy and the regulation of resides at Westminster. And that, so the capacity, I mean, the Falkirk Council, you yourself in terms of hours contributing, are having to do a tremendous amount to tackle the root cause in policy terms that resides at Westminster rather than in our own Scottish Parliament. And that's one of the reasons, but we're making the connection to people why being accountable and responsible for our own policy making in this critical area of energy. And here we are, we're talking about climate change, but how climate change affects people's lives. And it's important for the listeners to understand how we arrived at that position and the mitigations that the council's having to make. Now we've jumped about here, we've moved quite quickly from community resilience into energy, climate change, which we all agree is one of the burning issues of the day. But I noticed we've got a question in from Stephen Aitkenhead, who'll be well known to you all recently. And Stephen comments that one huge change recently is that the community participatory budgeting has been undertaking. And any thoughts as how this will help communities? Now, David, I want to bring you back in here and get any initial thoughts about participatory budgeting. I mean, obviously everyone's been looking at this. Any sort of thoughts how that you might be able to use that to benefit Grangemouth? Yeah,
well, as I mentioned earlier, we've got some fantastic groups in the town, working in the parks, Friends in Shira Park, Friends in Rannoch Park. We've got the Glitter team. There's loads of other groups out there as well. We've got Kersey Bank and You to You, they basically run food banks and stuff like that. So I think we've got to try and enhance the work that the community are doing. They're doing a fantastic job as it is, but we've got to try and enhance that and help them to do it more effectively and do it easier as well. So it's easier on them and they can do more, etc., etc. So we've all got a part to play in that. Yeah. We can't just leave them to it. We've got to help them as well. So. Yeah,
and I think everyone will have you in that. But one thing that strikes me that I don't think is commonly understood is the tremendous effort all of you put into your areas. I mean, the hours that you guys work in terms of the range of meetings and committees that you're on, plus the voluminous emails covering a multitude of topics. I genuinely don't think that is understood in the communities. I mean, tell me about a typical day for you, David, and I'm going to ask everyone else that as well, because I think that's an important point to bring home.
Yeah, well, there's no such thing as a typical day, really. Some days you're not too bad, other days it's just pandemonium, and everything between that. This morning, for example, I had a message from someone at 4:15 this morning, wondering how they could get involved in plant trees. So I've already got back to them. I'm looking at some stuff for them just now. But you can get messages at any time of the day or night. And then, well, after that, I went on to, they had an event at Shire Park today. So I went down there and saw the friends in Shire Park. Yeah, it was a beautiful day. They had loads of families there, loads of kids there, planting poppies and wildflowers. And it was fantastic to be part of that and go and see the kids laughing and smiling and having a great time.
And help make things happen for people. So Adanna then, I mean, obviously you've described the geography of your constituency. Between the committees that you're on and involved in and the geography, what does your kind of average week look like for you?
I suppose I view myself as quite fortunate in some respects, because I don't have another job. So I have all my hours, you know, to focus on being a councillor. And just as what Laura was saying there as well about having a ward partner, sometimes can make things a bit easier and help carry the workload. But as you said, Michelle, I don't think people do quite understand what the councillors entail. But at the same time, I do think people in our communities recognise that if they need help with whatever situation that they find themselves in, their councillor is the person to go to, whether it's a repair within their council house, or a tree in a private piece of ground next to their house, which is having an effect on their standard of living, whether it's a traffic situation, you know, it is just varies. I always have a laugh to myself at times, because, you know, 1 minute you could be on a meeting with the director of, part of my remit is education, so the director of children's services, and we're talking at high level, and the next minute we're talking about someone's leaky toilet, you know, and how we're going to fix that, and also someone's a slab in their garden path, you know, is uneven, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's vast, but also interesting. Yeah. But as David said as well, I think because we've got the media the way it is now, and because people work shifts and work different things, you know, and maybe someone's lying awake one night and a wee thought's popped into their head, they can't sleep, and their phone's at the side of their bed, and before we know it, you know, we're getting an email in the middle at 4 o'clock, as David says, at 4 o'clock in the morning, you know. And I think we have to, you have to look after yourself as well, because we can't be on call in morning, noon and night, you know, and I think people appreciate that. But the one thing you do have to ensure is that people know your limitations, and that's where you come in, because often people will threaten us councillors with, I'm going to my MSP, you know, that idea, because they think there's a pecking order.
Yeah.
Whereas we then have to explain, well, you can go to your MSP if you like, you know, here's your address, there's an email. In fact, I can give you your personal phone number if you want. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. But you know, some things sit with councils, and some things that sit with our Scottish Government, and as you've already mentioned, some things sit with Westminster Government. And I think us as councillors are are kind of in the best position to explain that to people, you know. So yeah, we have to be a kind of jack of all trades, but that's where our relationship, obviously, with our council officers and council employees is vital as well, because when you need something sorted and you won't need it sorted quickly, we obviously need to know, you know, exactly who to go to get that actioned as quick as possible. So it's building up networks where we are colleagues with each other, and building up relationships, obviously, within the council and with yourself.
Yes.
So yeah, it's.
I think the sense of, I mean, that's come through so strongly. And of course, we're laughing about that. We know we've already had a discussion about a couple of constituent people who've come in to me asking questions. And of course, I've immediately said, you come into you and said, right, what's the position here? So we get the context, because I think the concept of team, we operate as team SNP in the wider region across Falkirk. And of course, Laura's quite correctly mentioned Gary Bouse as well. And I know Laura and Gary agreed that Laura would contribute for them both today. And so bringing you back in then, Laura, we've got another question here, which I think might be of interest to you from Ian Murray. There's been the decision made to pull Falkirk Community Trust back in-house. And I can see that will have opportunities, that will present opportunities in certain respects for Falkirk Council. What's the chat on the street with the councillors in terms of Falkirk Community Trust? And that it might be useful for people to understand the context and background as well, Laura.
Okay, so I mean, we've made a decision at council level to bring the trust back in-house, and that enables, before it was what's called an ALIO, an arm's length organisation, which meant that the council owned all the assets, if you like, it owned all the buildings, and every year we have to pass a business plan and budgets which go to the community trust, but sitting at arm's length, in theory, enabled them to source extra funding from elsewhere that we couldn't, or and operate in an independent way. So we have members of there are councillors who are on the board. Equally, they were independent members, but over a long period of time, the trust wasn't performing in the way that we all would have liked, and it's a long story we're not going to go into, but ultimately there are hard choices to be made, and part of what we're doing across the whole Falkirk Council area in terms of looking at the strategic property review. So we're looking at all the buildings that the council owns, and going back to the previous question, which was about community and participatory budgeting and things like that, what we need to try to understand is building our community based on the needs of what people here actually need, by having the trust back in house, and by not just seeing leisure, culture, sport all in one place, and bringing it, so we, there are elements which were within education, there are elements which were within tourism and sport, but it gives us more ability while we're doing these other transitions to actually have more control. So there's always swings and roundabouts with things, but it's actually quite an exciting time. And you talked about the team approach, and I think it's something which we can you see some of the things in our manifesto as well about look at whether it's even just the play parks or other things, but there's lots of opportunities for us to be able to work on that and integrate with that. And I know you were asking there about typical days and stuff like that, and one of the other things that's in our manifesto for this election is very much to review both local government. There's already the local governance review, but there's that element of how community fits in with local governance and national governance, and that's really, really crucial, really crucial.
And it's an important point that's come through about people driven rather than asset driven. I was out at Kinnaird House, Cecil Meiklejohn, the leader of Falkirk Council, and I were there I was being given a tour by the Friends of Kinnaird House Trust. Friends of Kinnaird, I should say, I think it is a trust actually, and that was fascinating. And what the person was describing was that the stakeholder agencies that had interest in Kinnaird House tended to look at it from their own kind of, well, we're accountable for this bit and we're accountable from that bit, rather than looking at it from, it's a superb, absolutely amazing resource for the community that hasn't been looked at in quite that respect. But anyway, we cannot have a show on this afternoon with a bunch of SNP councillors and a prospective MSP without talking a wee bit of politics. We're going to have to do that. So let's just change the tone a wee bit. Now, obviously, you guys are SNP councillors. I'm standing to be an SNP MSP, and I think I've made it really clear why I am such a strong supporter of independence for Scotland. But I'm very interested in all your perspectives, because we are unified by that one common goal. So Gordon, I think you might have some hinterland on us all. Tell me why you believe that independence for Scotland is the best way to go.
Well, first of all, I joined the SNP way back in September 1974. And one of the issues, obviously, when I joined the SNP, there was two things that obviously, one was self-determination. In other words, the ability to run your own affairs, to be able to make your own policies, and at the same time, to be able to help your own communities through those policies. And the other thing about the SNP membership in those days, it was about the furtherance of all things Scottish, about standing up for Scotland.
And it said that on membership cards, didn't it?
So, yes, that was the 2 points on our membership card. And of course, I think also at that time, it was the old Clickmannon and East Stirling constituency. Mm-hmm. I joined in October 74. I had been helping from February off and on in various ways. And it was George Reid, who was the MP, who was elected in 1974. I suppose in one sense was the driving force to join the SNP, be part of a team that was standing up for Scotland, and we had representation in Westminster. Before that, when I was at school, it was the boroughs, I think it was around about 1971, it was the boroughs by-election where we had the Falkirk, Grangemouth and Stirling. In those days, it was the separate boroughs constituency. And Harry Ewing, who was the Labour candidate, came to my school. That was Graham High School. And the pupils had all been invited, or who had wanted to come and ask questions. And the first question, and I always remember afterwards talking to Harry years later about politics, because politics in those days was a bit more friendly. Harry Ewing would walk up Falkirk High Street and you could talk to people in those days. And I used to talk to him. But my first question when he came to Graham High School in those days, I stood up and I asked him, I said, Mr. Ewing, do you believe in a Scottish Parliament? And I think it almost floored half the folk there, because I had the audacity to stand up there and basically stand up for Scotland. Mm-hmm. In October 74, one of the other driving forces, which basically was, in those days, there was a report came out. I think it was called, I've got it here, the National Children's Bureau. And it was a report written in 1973. And it was called Born to Fail. And basically, it was a survey which covered the UK, but it also covered Scotland as well. And that highlighted that 1 in 10 children in Scotland were classified as disadvantaged. Now, that meant that the parents couldn't afford the necessities of life. Today, obviously, we live in a different society, but in those days, that was the culture.
So it was about poverty.
And to that was that people lived in poverty, there was low income, poor housing, poor social mobility, ill health, and poorer education attainment.
Yeah, but apart from that, the union was a splendid thing.
Yes.
Precisely. How about yourself then, Adanna?
Well, the thing, I should also add a couple of other reasons why I joined the SNP. was one of the other driving issues was the lack of opportunity, lack of employment opportunity for people in Scotland. And and the outcome of that was that the population of Scotland was reducing through emigration.
Yeah, and that's something that, you know, the Scottish Government have worked so hard to address.
Yes.
And of course, Brexit has brought concerns because, you know, because young people coming to our shores, our concept about, you know, how they contribute diversity in our society. But we digress. But I want to
driving foot, just to add on just that one wee bit about emigration, was that emigration affected every member, every family in the country. What my relatives, that was my Aunt Sheila, Uncle George, emigrated in 1972 to New Zealand.
Yeah, and we've lost a lot of people. Right, I'm going to bring in everyone else as well.
Sorry, I'm
no, not at all. But so Adanna, because I'm interested in to hear from Adanna and Laura and David what it is. How do they conceptualise independence? Why the SNP? So Adanna, give me your thoughts.
I think I come from a large family that who were encouraged to speak out. We were encouraged, you know, both my brothers and my sisters. My parents were very strong in their opinions of various things, socialist things. And I think from a young age, I saw the unfairness in the way that we were treated in Scotland. And that gave me the backbone to think, you know, we would be far better a country if we were making our own decisions and taking our own choices with our own finance. And that's the bottom line. Unless you're in control of you know your finances within your country, then you cannot make the decisions. You cannot lead forward. And I think for a very, very young age, although my family probably voted Labour like most people in Scotland did, but you know, looking at the history and the way the Labour Party just took us for granted in Scotland to get themselves in, and the fact that, you know, in this united kingdom that we sit in, that there is a bigger portion of that kingdom that will always dictate. It doesn't matter what way we vote in Scotland, there is a bigger portion of the United Kingdom that will always dictate and always get the results. And our country is so rich in resources. The people, I mean, we laugh about, you know, the Scots have travelled the world and invented things throughout the world, yet we have poverty that is unacceptable. We have families in poverty that is unacceptable. And I think that's what forces me forward as far as becoming an SNP member. I've always been a very strong trade unionist, and I've always fought for the underdog, and I've always fought for equality, but never wanted to really be part of a political party, because as we know, when you become part of a party, you have to come under that party's rules.
Yeah.
You know, we debate them, we have our debates, we have our conferences, we have our discussions, but when we take votes democratically, and we stand by that. And that's something that obviously I've been taught through being a trade unionist as well, you know. And in 2014, when I got involved in the Yes movement, and we were, you know, fighting, and the onslaught of abuse of power that came from down south, and some of the unions and the positions they took totally disgusted me, to the point where I've obviously joined the SNP, because the SNP is the real only strong party that can take us forward into our independence. And since then, I've had nothing but abuse, really.
Yeah, well, I suppose
I'm joking about that, but you know, it's obviously our party is the party that's going to fight for independence and take us to that position. But support the people of Scotland, and my children, you know, need a better place, a better country to live in.
Absolutely. And so David, and then Laura. David, you've been in the SNP a long time now, council a long time. What is it about independence?
Well, I've always supported independence for Scotland, because I think the two words that kind of sum it up are we can. Doesn't matter what it is, we can. When I was young, I got one of these Thatcher's kind of yopper type jobs after I left the school.
Yeah.
And you just get nowhere. You're just slave labour. So there had to be something better. Eventually went back to university where I studied industrial physics and energy engineering. And then what I learned when I was there was Scotland's potential for renewable energy is phenomenal. And I also learned when I was there that at one point Scotland had 8 MEPs. One of them was none other than Madam McCue, Winnie Ewing.
Yeah, I campaigned for Winnie Ewing. Yeah,
well, many years before I was involved in the SNP, Winnie had actually tried to get Scotland recognised as a centre of excellence for renewable energy. And the other 7 so-called Scottish MEPs voted against her. The other 7 were all Labour. Now, that to me, voting against their own country for something like that is just horrendous. So that is one of the things that kind of stuck in my head at the time, and has kind of pushed me on in the SNP as well, remembering that. The potential that we've got is tremendous. If we can just get independent and then be as good as other countries. Maybe not better, but we can be as good as. So one of the other things that stuck in my mind was when I was studying was we covered nuclear energy and nuclear like radiation and stuff like that. And it's a horrendous thing. You've seen the things that have happened elsewhere in the world with nuclear power that's gone wrong. But the one thing is we have Trident sitting just outside Glasgow, and we've got no say on that. And that's wrong. We need a say, and we say no. So that's one of the other things. There's so many things that we need to have self-determination to do our own thing. What we want to do for our people and our nation.
And how about yourself?
That's basically it.
It's very compelling. How about yourself then, Laura? What's brought you to the SNP table?
Many things, and I have to say I absolutely agree with David on the last one. Having met my partner at Faslane at an anti-nuclear demonstration many years ago, it's one of the big issues that we talk a lot about, poverty and a lot of the things which Scotland faces. But we always have money for Trident, and it's even the Scottish Labour Party don't agree with it, but yet they're tied to that policy because they have to do what Westminster say. And that's what brought me to the party. Was back in 1997 I joined when I went to university the first time, and I grew up in North Lanarkshire in Airdrie, and I'm not going to say in complete poverty, or my dad was a teacher, but with poverty around me in a council house, all the rest of it, and like Adanna, I had that Labour, socialist, trade union background, and as having been born in 1980, all I knew was Tory rule. I grew up through Thatcher and saw these things on the TV and thought of them as being the antithesis of what I wanted our country to be. And I did think that a Labour government coming in 1997 was the great hope. I would have expected to be joining the Labour Party, because from a principle point of view, that's where I felt my internationalist, socialist, anti-poverty credentials would sit. And the first thing that they did as a student was to impose loans and to take away free education. And I didn't believe people when they said that this is what they were going to do. And it was one of the very first things that Tony Blair's government did. And then it just went on from there. And it showed me very, very clearly that, the voice of Scotland and what Scotland were saying was, it didn't matter what we did. I've been grown up saying it doesn't matter if England vote Tory and we all vote Labour, there'll be a Tory government. But again, even if there was a Labour government, it didn't matter because our voice wasn't heard. And we've seen that consistently. And Trident's just one example, but there's loads of other examples too. So I joined the SNP student wing back then and was active in that for very many years. And just really, I think when you were talking there about the two things on the SNP's pledge or membership card, if you like, independence and the furtherance of all Scottish interests, those two things are so linked. And that's why the link, I think, you know, all of us as a team, as councillors, you know, we get a phone call or an email that starts with, "I'm really, really sorry to bother you. My mum has just died. I need some help with this." Or somebody has a mental health issue. Somebody can't feed their family. Somebody has a problem with their education thing. Or it's something to do with something we need to input on national policy, or it doesn't matter what it is. These things matter on a daily basis, are really, really important. Those are the furtherance of all Scottish interests. That's what we've been doing in government and local government. And it's not just about, and it's nothing to do with independence for the sake of it. It's because we understand right from the ground up what it is that the people of Scotland need. And that's why you need everybody in that team. And that's why I think there's people who ask questions about the vote SNP 1 and 2. Well, that's why that's crucial, because if you want a government, a strong government, that it's not just about independence or something as a top line. Yes, that's a really crucial thing for our long-term, country and what we all believe in. But it's the fact that we all understand the daily stuff and the importance of all the minutiae of the little things, and we're doing that on a daily basis. That's what makes us the government that needs to be put forward. You know. So
I mean, these have all been fascinating contributions, and it's interesting if you kind of looked at the physiology of you all talking, how, you know, we can talk about some of the issues in your areas and the challenges, and then we're kind of up and at them because we care so passionately about this. And I suppose through my experience with the SNP, I am continually humbled and struck by how hard everyone works. That jumped right out at me when I was an MP in Westminster, how our guys worked their socks off rather than taking it as a sense of entitlement. And going back to Adanna's point about the Labour Party, I mean, I believe that the Labour Party in Scotland will never be forgiven on their stance of choosing to side with the Tories in the first independence referendum. And they've nowhere near getting their policy sorted out. There are many people in the Labour Party who are independent supporters and are almost kind of clinging on because if they leave, they know that the party is doomed. But, well, you know, if we want a future. And the other thing that strikes me through all of our conversations today is how values-based what we're talking about is. So free education, when the rocks melt with the sun, will we introduce fees? Anti-nuclear, the idea of having these abominations to nearest our largest city, and of course most of Scotland in the event of something happening would be wiped out. There's no point saying, oh well, I live here. No, sorry, we're all a goner, and yet we have no control over that. That is completely ridiculous. So I too am incredibly passionate about it. So now we've got 6 minutes left. Sorry, Gordon.
I was just going to say, can I add to what you were saying there? Just a wee anecdotal. When I was the parliamentary candidate in Dunfermline West in 1987, I remember standing in the high street and a gentleman came over and they said to me, "Why do you want independence?" It turned out he had immigrated to Canada and he was getting opportunities because he had emigrated, but he hadn't made the connection why we were looking for independence. And from that day, I always realized that internationalism was so important, about connections with other countries. And that was why I was so aggrieved that when we left the European Union, because the opportunities were diminishing. As I saw the future in that respect. And so Brexit for me was a step back, not just a step back for myself and for people in the country, but it was a step back for our future.
Yeah, and as Winnie Ewing, somebody mentioned her earlier, used to say, "Stop the world, Scotland wants to get on." And there's a very good article today in the Guardian written by the First Minister about depicting the scenario where you know, you're emerging from a COVID pandemic, yet you don't have the macroeconomic powers to make the changes you need to see. Oh, and you've also been forcibly removed from a huge market where your businesses trade and you've got no say in it. That's a ridiculous notion. And I think Brexit is going to turn out to be really quite a change for many people. Now, I'm always keeping an eye on the time. We've got 4 minutes left. So I'm going to give you a chance, all four of you. You have literally got 30 seconds to describe to me what you want an independent Scotland to look like or feel like. And I'm going to cut you off if you go on too long. So Laura, you go first.
I want it to be basically a forward-thinking, world-leading, ecologically climate positive environment for our kids to grow up in, and for everybody to feel safe and secure in a intersectional, international manner.
Brilliant. Okay, and Adanna, tell me about your Scotland.
I want my country to be open and welcoming to every nation throughout our entire world. I want people to come here and leave with the memories that or stay, and because we're so open and welcoming that they want to build their lives and have their families here too. I want my country, Scotland, to be equal in every way and respect every single person for who they are within our country, from the smallest baby to the oldest person.
Brilliant. Okay, and David?
In 30 seconds, that's hard to beat that. I think basically what Laura and Adanna said, and I would just add that I want Scotland to be what we can make it.
Yeah. And Gordon?
I want Scotland to be outward looking, ambitious for its people. I want us to develop everyone's potential to their best ability. And I want our country to be, in some respects, a leader in international relations.
And there's certainly plenty of opportunity for that. Well, I must say, I'll tell the listeners a wee bit about what we're going to be doing next week before we wind up. Now, next week, we've got young people on. This is next Sunday afternoon. We're not doing Thursday evening. Next Sunday afternoon, we have David Mitchell from Bowness. We have Jennifer Potter from the Braes and Dylan McDough from Tryst. Now, just to give you a wee trail, there's an article in the National today about some software that Jennifer has customised for Sims 4. And when we started this election campaign, one of my challenges was it's a different campaign, so campaign differently. And she came up with this idea of customising the Sims 4 software to create characters that could dress in various kind of branded SNP or Yes type attire, including at my request for people's pets, because I think most people by now have seen my little border terrier, Benji. So I'm just going to, it's a 10-second clip. I just want to show you the sort of thing that Jenny has developed before we wrap up for today. So hopefully it will be on just in 2 ticks. "Oh, my darling wee one, the whole world welcomes you," said Jackie Kay. "All newborn babies in Scotland will be given a box of essential items to support them and their parent in their first few weeks of life, thanks to the SNP. Right, so we're going to have Jennifer on next week along with David and Dylan, so that's going to be great.
Oh, yeah.
And finally then wrapping up, I have to say a massive thank you to the